Hi, everybody. It is 10 days till Christmas. It's hard to believe. Christmas time is, of course, a season of giving, but in a lot of our minds, for a lot of our lives, it's also a season of getting. And this starts in childhood. We're excited about the presents. There's nothing wrong with that. That's natural. But that attitude can get out of hand, and that can sort of overshadow what Christmas is really about for some of us. And we think more about what we're going to get than about Jesus Christ. In fact, even as adults, we can look at the holidays as a time to keep an eye out for that special deal, that special sale, so we can get a new television or a new computer or whatever we have our eye on. And that's because one of the things that we are so prone to as human beings, especially as human beings living nearby other people, when we see all the things that they have, we are so prone to envy. Now, the other night we had a senior youth gathering, and we talked about the topic of envy. And it's so relevant to our lives that I wanted to talk about it here on Tuesday as well in this video. Now, envy can be defined a lot of ways. I think we think of it as wanting what somebody else has. We see that another person has a nicer car than we have, and we really want that. That's true. It can also be defined negatively as disliking that person because they have that nice thing. Somebody has more than us or better than us, and we think spiteful, angry things against that person. If you type in envy to Google, the definition that comes up is a feeling of discontent or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. So it's a feeling of discontent or resentful longing. Envy is also listed as one of the 7 deadly sins in the history of the church. And one writer pointed out it's the only one of the 7 deadly sins that is absolutely no fun. The others have some allure, they have some fun, they have some draw to get you in. Lust, gluttony. I mean, you start out eating more and more, and it's good for a while until it starts to take over and destroy your life. Same with sloth. It's fun to be lazy for a while until it gets out of hand and it starts to destroy your life. But envy is never fun. Envy is miserable, a feeling of discontent or resentful longing for what someone else has. Now, there's a psalm in the Bible that speaks to envy. The psalmist looks around at the world around him and the people who are prospering, and he is eaten up inside by envy. We can relate to this psalmist, whether we're watching advertisements on TV or whether we are scrolling through people's well-curated, manufactured lives on Instagram or other social media. We look around at the world around us, people who are prospering, and we grow envious, and it eats us up inside. But then the psalmist has a transformation. So this is Psalm 73. I'm going to go through it and stop periodically to say some things about it as we go through. So the psalm starts out, the writer says, "Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart." It's a great sort of overall topic statement. But then there's a shift. He says, "But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold." Something is not going well with this writer. Why? Verse 3. "For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." So he's thinking the wrong people are prospering. They're doing well. They've got it all. It's the wicked and the arrogant. Their lives are going so well, and I envy them. Then he goes on to describe what their lives look like. He says, "They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They are not plagued by human ills. Therefore, pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. From their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance they threaten oppression. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. They just claim everything for themselves. Therefore, their people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. They've got a lot of followers. You can translate this into a social media context. Here are these people who are living over-the-top lives. They're arrogant. They claim everything for themselves, and they've got all the followers. The writer is envious. Therefore, their people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. This is what these arrogant people say. How would God know? Does the Most High know anything? This is what the wicked are like. Always free of care, they go about amassing wealth. This psalmist is envious. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure. I've tried to live a good religious life, but it's all for nothing. And I have washed my hands in innocence. All day long I have been afflicted, and every morning brings new punishment. So here's the comparison he's bringing. Here are these wicked people, pay no attention to doing right. They're arrogant, but they're wealthy, and they've got followers and fans, and they're doing great. And me, on the other hand, I'm trying to lead a good, pure life, and it's getting me nowhere. I wonder if some of us have felt that way before, looking at who prospers in the world and how things go for us. Then a big shift happens again for the psalmist. We're at verse 15. He says, if I had spoken out like that, meaning if I had gone around saying that instead of keeping this as my own sort of the meditation of my heart, if I had gone about proclaiming these kinds of ideas, I would have betrayed your children. Here it's clear he's talking to God. When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply until I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final destiny. So something has transformed in the writer's perspective, and it happens once he enters the sanctuary of God. So he's out here in the world, he's looking out his window, he's looking at his Twitter feed, he's looking at the Instagram pages of people who are very successful and very arrogant, and he's looking at his life from his own house, and it's eating him up inside. Then he enters God's sanctuary, and he gets a different perspective. He says, then I understood their final destiny. He takes an eternal view of things. He starts talking to God again here. He says, surely you place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin. How suddenly they are destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. They are like a dream when one awakes. When you arise, Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. See how different his perspective of these people has become once he's entered God's sanctuary. He sees it from an eternal view. These people are not on this pedestal of prosperity. Their time is short. The way they're living unwisely will soon dry up. He says, when my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you. And then now this is how he sees himself in God's presence. He says, yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. And then he says these wonderful lines of relying on God. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. And he wraps it up with these statements. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, It is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds. You see the radical transformation that comes in the life and the mind of this psalmist, from envy to fully relying, depending on God, and worshiping God for his goodness. This is a complete reorientation. People sometimes say that the Psalms show the full depth of human experience, that we see the world a certain way, and then we are disoriented when it doesn't seem to be working out that way. We think good things happen to the righteous, bad things happen to the unrighteous. Then we look out in the world and it's not always that way, like the psalmist finds out. He looks out at the wicked and they're doing great, so he is disoriented. Then he comes into God's presence, into God's sanctuary, and he is reoriented. He finds a new orientation that's anchored on God's goodness, on God's promises, and on an eternal perspective of life. So that is a word of caution against envy and a word of hope for those who rely on God. Hope you have a great week, great holiday season as we anticipate celebrating Christmas together and separately in our families. I hope it's a time of excitement and a time of giving, getting, but most of all, a time of remembering Jesus Christ. We'll see you again next time.